So now I'm going to talk about distressing near-death experiences, and just to briefly go over it again, and I realise that not everyone completely understands near-death experiences, is that when people who die, and I was just saying to a lady in the break that the near-death experiences I find really fascinating are when people have cardiac arrest in hospital, and they're hooked up to all the monitors, and they're pronounced clinically dead, and sometimes they can end up actually going to the morgue. They don't wake up straight away. And there's a really well-known case of a guy called George Rodaniah in USA, and I might have told some of you this before, where he woke up in the morgue, and I just saw there's a case, I think I posted on their Afterlife page, on the Afterlife Discussions Facebook page. I think I posted something just this week about a 95-year-old man who had died in India, and the family had all shaved their heads, as was the custom apparently, and he woke up a few days later from his casket. But anyway, that would be terrible. I know, you freak out.
What happens if you're an organ donor?
I know.
No, seriously.
I know, it's been removed from my driver's license.
It has.
No, it's going to be. If I haven't done it already, I might have. But anyway, yes. But that's a point, yes. If you're an organ donor...
Well, if you were dead, you soon would be.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. But boy, you'd wake up quickly, wouldn't you?
With poor old George Rodaniah, he woke up in the morgue, and...
he wasn't in one of those fridges, was he? Lying down?
Yes, they were pulling him out to do the
Autopsy.
yeah, and they'd done the tea cut or whatever it is they call it, and his eyes flickered open, and the guy who was doing it thought, oh, that's just one of the responses, keeps on going, eyes flicker again, and he cut another one, and then that was when both eyes opened up, and he realised, he put a light over and went, this guy's not dead, but he's got a dead big cut on him. So that's a bit of a worry. So
you just wonder how many have been missed, though, don't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you remember, years ago they used to bury people with a bell.
Yeah.
And that's where that phrase for "who the bell tolls" come from, because they used to bury them with a little string in the casket, and there'd be a bell outside, and if they woke up, someone would go, "Oh, they're not dead. Let's dig them up." Yeah.
Wow.
So yes, it happens a lot. Maybe not so much now, but it still happens. So anyway, and when that happens, people have these near-death experiences, and I know some of you in this room have had some. Who's had a near-death experience? You don't have to talk about it, but
My husband has.
yes, yeah. So. And in my case, it was a distressing near-death experience. So I came to understand that not all experiences are positive, not all are about heavenly bliss. So, and a few years ago, I went to a presentation at the Theosophical Society in the city, and the president of the International Association of Near-Death Studies in Australia at that time, which doesn't exist now, I think, was there speaking and said, all near-death experiences are positive and uplifting and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, no, they're not. And because I'd read lots of cases by then in the literature about people having hellish type near-death experiences, which, as you can imagine, would be extremely frightening. And people and I'll get on to that, I'm getting ahead of myself, but anyway, so now let me just say before I go on.
Can you share yours?
I will later.
Thank you.
Yeah. I will. Let me just say that no one knows definitively why we have near-death experiences. In this subject, there is a lot of human projection, belief, judgment about the experiences that people have. We cannot say why we have them. We can say, well, because people have them, and that's what we can say, people have them, because people have them, there is an afterlife, or because people have them and report these experiences, they have these, you know, there is something that's going on. And I say, yes, there is. There is definitely something going on. People who have near-death experiences, who die, leave their bodies, have some sort of interaction with a deceased relative. And I was saying to the lady in the break about communicate with a deceased sibling who died before the NDE was actually born, gives them some information. They come back to this life and speak to their parents and say, hey, did you have a son before I was born? Well, yes, we did, but we weren't going to tell you. So that's really good evidence that there is something profoundly deep and meaningful, perhaps, that is going on when we leave our bodies. The other thing is, no one knows why some people have heaven-like near-death experiences and others don't. Just like UFO encounters, right, UFO people? The big question still remains, why do some people have those experiences and others not? Why do people have out-of-body experiences and others don't? Why do some people see guardian angels or ghosts and others don't? There are people who go their whole lives and say, I've never had a strange experience. You know, what's that about? Why? Why? I want to know why. Okay, so there's a lot we don't know. Now, on to distressing near-death experiences. Who saw this movie? Ghost. Yeah. Do you remember towards the end, there was a character in it, and I just watched it again, not the whole movie, but the end piece this morning, where Carl, the character of Carl, who organised for something to be stolen out of Sam's wallet in the beginning, which ended up with him being shot and he died. So in the end, Sam, who has now got the superpower, even though he's dead, he's learned to manipulate matter, and he can, in his non-physical state, has learned to punch people, and he gives the old Carl, the old 1, 2, 3, ouch. So, and what happens is he pushes him through a window, the glass breaks, Carl falls back, and a piece of glass comes down, hits him in the chest, and he's gone. Thoughts?
Being really bad and feeling guilty.
Exactly, yes. Because of that human judgment, yes, because bad people have bad things happen to them, and good people only have good things happen. That's a load of crap.
Yeah.
Bad things happen to good people all the time. Yeah. So, sorry, I said crap. Sorry, Hellish. Just edit that piece out. So, so there's a whole lot of reasons people don't talk about it, and they don't talk about it, particularly if they've had a distressing experience and they've come from a religious background. Because they're not going to go tell their pastor that, probably. I mean, you're lucky to tell a pastor or a priest about a positive near-death experience for them to accept that. They're usually the last to be receptive to those experiences. Would you say that, Marie?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very last.
Yeah.
But can I ask a question there? I don't suppose you know the answer. but I don't suppose anybody knows the answer, but just in case. I'd like to know what the proportion of people that have bad NDEs are people that are heavily involved in some sort of religion.
Yes, good point. I'll get onto that a bit, but some of them. For example, if they die, they leave their body and they go to heaven, and they don't see God.
Yeah.
Where's God? My whole life it's been, I've been told that I'm going to meet God when I die. Well, they don't, and that's quite distressing for people.
A lot of people don't, a lot of religious ones don't believe in the afterlife and reincarnation, do they?
Yes, who is it? Is it Jehovah's Witnesses believe that when they die they just lay on the ground, and then at some time in the future when Jesus returns...
Well, people that don't believe that, so maybe they don't get the same experience.
Yes,
because they
Exactly.
don't believe.
Yeah.
I think that's what I was touching on
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah.
You get what you expect a
Yeah.
lot of the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes, obviously, what you don't expect as well.
Yes, I did.
But a lot of it is, you get what you expect, don't you?
Yeah.
Programs sort of.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
Yeah.
they don't get what they're expecting because when they do expect to meet God, but they don't get it.
Oh, well, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're not getting what they do expect. But anyway.
No, I think
It's so messy. It's messy. It's a messy business, this living and dying, I tell you. Well, it is. It's just it's a cosmic dance of life and death and life and death and life and death. And trying to understand it, I think sometimes it's just too big for our puny human brain. People who have distressing near-death experiences have less focused messages, because often people will come back with a message from their experience that they need to, like you said before, you girls said, need to do a turnaround, that sort of thing. It's much clearer for them. Or whatever, other messages. Follows the same shamanic pattern of suffering, death and resurrection. That comes up in near-death experiences, in shamanic initiation experiences where people have an experience, they're dragged off by the spirits, they are symbolically stripped down to their bone, their flesh is ripped off, and they have to rebuild themselves from scratch, symbolically, of course. And in so doing, they shed their old identity and reborn with a new identity. Basically, come out the other side of the experience with a new identity, or starting to rebuild anyway. And they have a realization that the physical world is not the full extent of reality, the same as people who have positive near-death experiences. Now, this lady, Nancy Evans Bush, I had one of her books and I lost it, so I bought it again, but I bought the other one. But it doesn't matter, because they're both good. And Dancing Past the Dark and The Buddha in Hell and Other Alarms. So Nancy Evans Bush, when she was 28 in the 1960s, during childbirth, with her second child, she was anaesthetised, as apparently they did in those days, and she left her body, excuse me, and was out in space where she could see Earth. And that comes up too in people who have these experiences. And she remembers thinking, oh, it is true, the Earth is round. So for her, that was a really profound moment during her experience. And possibly very telling that it may have been a real experience, right? Anyway, during her experience, she saw two black and white circles or orbs making a clicking sound as they approached her. And they communicated telepathically and said, you don't exist, you never existed, Earth doesn't exist. It was a big joke. It was a big, fat joke. Your life was a joke, and that's all there is. That was her experience that she had during her near death. And she stayed there for a while, and she argued very passionately that no, it hasn't been a joke, and it really does exist, and I know it does because I know geography and I know the countries on the planet, and I've had these experiences and I've cooked eggs in the morning for kids for breakfast, It's really happened. And they said, no, it was just a joke. It was part of your imagination. Can you imagine that? Oh my God. Anyway, so
it had to be real because she had an imagination so she could imagine.
yes, Rob. Spin that propeller. Go. So, anyway, then the circles moved away and she was left alone. And then she thought, where is God? Why isn't God showing up? And again, being from a religious background, that was a real shock to her, and that created a lot of distress for her in her life when she came back. But anyway, she's back in her body. At no time did she realise that she was actually dead, because she thought, if you can think, you're not dead. Which actually is quite true, really, I suppose. I don't know. See, I just don't know anything. Who knows?
From Descartes, I think, therefore I am.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Ron. So, she realised that this was not the heaven that she'd heard about, and she never spoke about her experience for 14 years. But eventually Nancy started to study the phenomenon of distressing NDEs, and she became the president of the International Association of Near-Death Studies in the States for many years. And in one of her interviews, she says, describing these experiences as distressing is like describing childbirth as uncomfortable. She says, I prefer to use the word annihilating because the experience annihilated her for such a long time. Her sense of self, her sense of purpose, the sense of who she was while she was on the planet, all those sorts of things. Everything she believed in just was completely annihilated. And that was very distressing for her. So she talks about it in her books and tries to help other people deal with it and get some perspective on that.
Cheryl, that's a rather malevolent thing for those little orbs to do, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And interesting and curious.
Yeah.
And why?
And that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Why?
Why in that
Why?
experience?
Why would they do that to that human being? Why?
But why orbs in the first place? Why circles, black and white circles making a clicking noise? Does that sound like technology? I don't know. I don't know. I'm very interested in cases that present details of those experiences where it sounds like it might be technology. For what purpose that is, I don't know. Because again,
distressing for that woman for so
yes.
long. That's a terrible thing to do to anybody, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Either
Yeah.
at that level, this level, or that level.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. Well, I would say though, because of that, the way it presented is that whatever those things were, really had no care about her, and that would have been another thing inherent in the experience, that there was no one looking after her. I think, you know, and I think that's really important for all of us to feel that psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, that there is some greater intelligence that we're a part of, and sometimes manoeuvres us into situations that maybe for our you know, send us in the right direction. You know, sometimes, who was it? Someone was speaking this morning. I was listening to Richard Dolan, and he was asked that question: is there a greater intelligence that is at work in the universe for you? Do you think that's real? And he said, you know what? Once I never did, but now I do. Because when I was younger, I was going to be a history professor. My life was mapped out. And then one thing after the other, bang, 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 that was just completely taken away and ended up down the UFO path. So, yeah. So, but when she had that experience and she felt that that wasn't there, that was awful. Just awful. She would have felt like a cork bobbing around on an ocean with no plan, no purpose, nothing, you know. Anyway, so Nancy collected these distressing near-death experience reports, and she put them into 3 different categories of inverse type experience. Oh, I've got inverse twice. Inverse, that should be void, and hellish. Okay, let's get off that then. So the inverse NDEs are where features usually reported in other pleasurable near-death experiences are perceived as hostile or threatening. So it depends on their perception. So for example, a man thrown from his horse found himself floating at treetop height, watching emergency medical technicians working over his body. And he's going, no, 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 this isn't right. And he screams and he says, put me back, put me back. But they didn't hear him. And then next he was shooting through darkness toward a bright light, flashing past shadowy people who seemed to be deceased family members waiting. And he was panic-stricken by the bizarre scenario and his inability to affect what was happening. So an inverse experience is where, like someone like Eben Alexander, he'd be going, oh cool, you know, like he was flying on the butterfly wings, you know, and he was looking at what was going on beneath him. So there's an element of perception of how you see your experience as to whether it's distressing or not. Then there's the void experiences, where people come to a vast emptiness. And I noticed, Marie, before you said that they come to that initially, and then they are met by spirit guides or
Yes.
deceased relatives.
Yes, that they gently wake them up and bring the memory to them.
Yes. And some of those void experiences, that sense of emptiness, could be because they're actually brought back before they have the rest of their experience. Okay. Other people I've spoken to told me about just going to a dark place and just floating there. But like in a womb, in their mother's womb, that sort of feeling. So for them, it might have been positive. For another person, it might have been negative too, okay? Sense of isolation, which like that woman had, from that Nancy had from her experience. There's no one there, there's nothing. It's just I'm alone in the cosmos out here looking at that round earth now. And that sense of being annihilated, where someone, in here it talks about, where was a case of a, blah, blah, blah. There was a case of a man being stripped bare, just pulled apart, completely disassembled, like I was talking about before, just completely annihilated. So there was no sense of himself left whatsoever in that experience. And then you have the hellish NDEs.
It gets worse.
It gets worse.
You could have started with this one.
Get the hard stuff over and done with. That's what I usually do, but not this time.
Okay.
It's been very surreptitious. Okay. So these are, as I said before, these are the least commonly reported type, the hellish type of experiences, but obviously they are. Isn't that awful? And you certainly wouldn't want to go there, and if you'd been there once, you certainly wouldn't want to go back, that's for sure. So, a couple of examples of this is a woman was being escorted through a frighteningly desolate landscape and saw a group of wandering spirits. They looked lost and in pain, but her guide indicated she was not allowed to help them. Well, that was not so bad. You can go there, but just don't help anybody, Andrew. Okay. But a woman who hemorrhaged from a ruptured fallopian tube reported an NDE involving horrific beings with grey gelatinous appendages grasping and clawing at her. And the sounds of their guttural moaning and the indescribable stench still remained 41 years later. Right? It's okay, there's a happy ending. Yes. There was no benign being of light, no live video, nothing beautiful or pleasant for her. Another one was a woman who attempted suicide, felt her body sliding downward in a cold, dark, watery environment. When I reached the bottom, she says, it resembled the entrance to a cave with what looked like webs hanging. And I heard cries, wails, moans and gnashing of teeth. I've never heard that, but anyway. I saw these beings that resembled humans with the shape of a head and body, but they were ugly and grotesque, and they were frightening and sounded like they were tormented in agony. So, obviously, people have these experiences. Now, when I was reading various cases, I was thinking, well, is it people who commit suicide? Is it people who are living a traumatic life? Is it people who are really ill? You know, that sort of thing. But when I went to the IAN's website, it said no. It's just anybody has these experiences. There's no religious predisposition. There's no suicidal disposition. None of that. And they should know because they've been studying this stuff for 45 years or something. But when I went to YouTube and I looked up, I tried to find some clips. I wanted to see what people were actually saying. There weren't as many of those video clips as what I thought there would be, and they weren't all. No, sorry, they were all of people who had tried to commit suicide or had difficult lives, being involved with drugs, that sort of thing. I was trying to find a hellish experience where someone hadn't had that, you know, in their had a surgery or something. I wanted to find an example of that. I couldn't find one, not on YouTube anyway. So now Nancy, as she continued to study these, she sort of again categorised the way that people respond to these experiences. And there's the turnaround, reductionism, and the long haul. That's how she's categorised them. So the turnaround is obvious, where they have a horrible near-death experience, but they come back and they change their ways, they change their life. And I often quote Daniel Brinkley. He was like that. He said before he had his near-death experience, he was a pig, and he knew it. But when he came back, he changed his ways. And now, I don't know if he's still doing it because he's not that well now, but he started helping return vets, going to their bedside when they were dying and giving them spiritual advice and all that sort of thing, and talking about the experiences he had during his near-death experience, which was very complex because he had 3 near-death experiences. So that he had a turnaround. People who go to the reductionism, well, it was a hallucination, or it must have been the dying brain, or it must have been this or that. And, if they've got this idea, well, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it must be a duck. But in this case, it's not necessarily so. So, and then there is the long haul. And that's where, and oh, by the way, these last two, I think, that experience, even though they compartmentalise it off into some sort of it must have been scenario, it still rattles around inside of them. It still has an effect on them, okay? To what degree, it's not quite clear to me, but the long haul this is where the response is, where people start to really question everything. And through the rest of their life, basically, probably like a lot of you here in this room. And what are the rules if the rules I lived by don't work, or they're not what I thought they were, or whatever, So, and they go on a quest, basically, to find answers to things that we may never know about, but maybe the answers aren't the reason why we go on the quest. Maybe it's the quest itself that is the most important part for us to suddenly pull down those parameters and continue to learn and seek. So these experiences, distressing ones and positive ones, they propel us to become more true to ourselves, so that we take on new challenges. We're open to that, and we're not corralled by what we thought before, okay? And that we view life from a wider perspective. Now, why do people have these experiences? I just want to get back to that. There's something that I do called soul collage, where I run a workshop. I haven't done it yet, but I might do it next year. I haven't done some in the last couple of years, but where people come together and we look deeply into our soul and we create these collages. And for this one that I put together, the name for it emerged as the restless disturber. And we all have a restless disturber. A restless disturber is something, some element within you, and perhaps without you, I don't know, which prompts us to not accept mediocrity in our lives, to do things and look at things and explore things that are outside the status quo. It also continuously invites us to the world of more, to look further, to look farther, to look deeper, look at the richness of life, look at the nano parts of our life, the space between our breaths and our heartbeats, where that's the most interesting, okay? And this is I guess, an aspect, you could call it an archetype, I suppose, that came up for me. There's always this part of me that goes against tradition. You can see the traditional thing in the back, but this part in the front is not very traditional at all. And it also works hand in hand with the thing in our life that helps us respond to the call when we get it. The call. Does everyone understand what the call is? The call is something that, like the work that I do in the UFO field, for example, that's my calling. That's my number one first calling. I've been doing that for 30 years. And And this sort of work too in the afterlife has become a part of that. It's not the first thing, but it's very strong as well. So, and it's a thing that we feel that we want to do. We want to be a musician, we want to be an engineer, we want to help people, all those sorts of things. So I thought about this and I thought, well, why do people have these, let's focus on the distressing near-death experiences. And I thought, maybe that distressing NDEs are a warrior's call to action. Maybe that there is some part of our soul, or some part of our soul group, or some part of something with our spirit guides that when we have these experiences, it awakens and enlivens. The word I want to use is ignites us. It ignites us to do something more than what we've been doing. And perhaps it works hand in hand with that restless disturber that's in us all the time. And I actually got, I was looking at that because this week there's been an online free summit about dreams. And I went on there and I looked at this woman who was talking about this, why people have nightmares. And she was saying, oh, maybe it's a warrior's call to action. And I thought, you know, that sort of fits with near-death, these distressing near-death experiences in particular, is that we have these experiences and to wake us up, you know, like we're not bad people, we just have a distressing experience, and somehow that rattles around inside of us so that we ask these really deep questions. We, you know, if I don't know, if I died, which I had, by the way, no, I haven't really, but
Make up your mind. Make up your mind.
just want to see if you're on your toes. But if I had had a heavenly experience, I know I would have come back and hallelujah, I'm a good person. But I didn't have that experience at all. And I didn't talk about it much, and I didn't like to talk about it much because it frightened the hell out of me, you know, and it wasn't that frightening. And I will tell you what that experience was now. I'm sure I bored you with this before.
So what you're saying really is it's not necessarily because the person is particularly bad, it's just that their soul is giving them a wake-up call. You're not doing enough, in effect.
Yeah, pretty much. Or perhaps you're not doing what you came to do.
Yeah.
And I don't get readings from people, but I've had one once, and that was all I needed. And that was when I was in my 20s, and it was actually organised by Glenys Mackay. It was a psychic fair over at Fairfield, and many years ago. And this guy, he said blah 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 blah, and something caught my attention. He said, "You are what you came to be. Now do what you came to do. Get on with it." Basically, boom. You know, you've got the skills that you came with the skills in this life, but put them into action. And I wasn't putting them into action in the way at that time to the fullest that I could have, to the fullest, and to the richness of it that I could have. But you know, sometimes you just got to grow into this stuff. You know, we're just human to start with. You know, we're just people. So anyway, that was my thinking. That's my hypothesis, that a distressing near-death experience could be a warrior's call to action. Don't know, but anyway, yes, you want to hear this story. Sorry. I'd been ill for a long time, and I went to a healer and had a hands-on healing session, came home, collapsed, and I was laying on the couch waiting for my husband to come home at the time, and I'm sure I bored you all with this before.
Not me.
Okay, and there was there was a large, swirling vortex appeared in the middle of the room, about 6 feet across in diameter, came through the lounge room wall. It was like that, like a very long, malleable ice cream cone that came out of the wall, got thicker as it came to the middle of the room, and then opened up horizontally to about 6 feet, like that. It's just like that thing, that vortex when you stir a bucket of water. You get that there,
Whirlpool.
just like that, yeah. And I saw it, and then it started to pull me into it. There was a big, a strong gravitational pull, almost like you'd imagine a black hole was sucking you in. There's nothing you can do with it. And I split off from my body. My non-physical self was just hanging onto the back of the lounge chair like this. Knuckles, like I really had white knuckles. You know, it was just the feeling of white knuckles anyway. Hanging on while my physical body's just laying on the couch. And I didn't have a full-blown near-death experience, because what happened was, while I'm hanging on, this went on for a while, I can't even remember now, but at least 30 seconds, maybe a minute. And when that was happening, I was feeling an energetic, my heartbeat was getting lower, there was an energetic, like oil was pumping out of my arm here, but it wasn't oil, it was obviously energy. And as that was pumping out like this, like spraying out, and I don't know why there, my heartbeat was getting lower and lower and lower and lower, and this pull on this vortex thing was getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And I knew that if I let go of that couch, that I would be sucked into this, I guess it would have played out as a tunnel, like a wormhole, who knows what it was. So I didn't let go. And what happened was, my daughter's name just went through my mind on like a ticker tape,
Yeah.
It was very strange. I've only read a couple of cases where people have visually seen a ticker tape go through their mind. And then it just all stopped. But the thing for me was that it was the terror, not just fear, but complete and utter terror in every cell of my body about going into this place. Now, there was no reason to be frightened. Nothing was happening that was hurting me at that stage. I didn't have, scary beings coming out and ripping my flesh off or anything like that. I was laying there watching this all play itself out. But there was how did I know? I knew, without any question of a doubt, that whatever was in there was not good. Was not good. So what was that? I don't know. But there was only one other time that I experienced that sense of terror, was when I had a close encounter back in about 1990. And I woke up during the night, saw these 3 small grey alien beings, I guess, next to the bed. And the sense of terror was just, like, I couldn't do anything, it was just, and it was the same, exactly the same sense of terror, the level of terror, everything. And maybe it was because I'd had that previously, that was why I was so frightened. I don't know. But I was just terror struck.
So did they take you away?
No.
That's good.
Because what did I do? I pulled the sheet up over my head, said the Lord's Prayer, went to sleep, apparently, when you're terror struck, apparently. And then the next day I got up, didn't remember it until later in the afternoon, and went, oh, that happened last night. And the memory just flooded back.
So maybe the Lord's Prayer's got more power than what we knew.
In hindsight,
Maybe they waited till you went to sleep.
Maybe. Yes.
if you had have let go,
Yes.
do you believe
Yes.
that you would not be here?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely, 100%.
Interesting, because I had a very similar experience, not exactly the same,
Yes.
but I know if I had have let go of what I was holding on to at that time, I would not be here now. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us?
It's a bit long-winded.
Okay.
Some other time.
Okay. Right, some other time.
Yeah, but it was a long-winded experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it around illness or accident or?
No, it's a
So-
case of not wanting to be here in the first place.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah, that happens.
Bad
to people.
husband, terrible marriage, and had just given up
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and laid down to actually die.
Ah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Without doing anything, just to give up.
Mm. Yeah. There was one other time when I felt like that too. I put my husband into the nursing home, and that week after I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, nothing, because I didn't really want him to be there, but I couldn't look after him at home anymore. I was really distressed. And I remember laying down on the bed and thinking, okay, it's all good, I can die now. And I meant it. And I think I could have easily given up the ghost then. Easily. But I didn't, but I could have. If I'd get prompted in the wrong direction, I could have. Yeah.
But I must say mine was a godly experience.
Well, you're lucky.
It was quite godly.
Yes. Oh, okay. And it was just to wind it up, just back onto what Marie was talking about earlier with life between lives regressions. I've done past life regressions. I've only done a handful of life between lives. But I've also read a lot of literature with reports of it, and a lot of those, not a lot, but quite a robust amount, reported seeing things like crystal cities and rivers of silver, lakes of silver, roadways of silver. And I just wondered why. Is it, I don't know exactly why, but I just found it really interesting.
Because I think that's what that person resonates with.
Yeah.
Some people may resonate with crystal. That's why I mentioned the crystal healing cave. But for somebody else, it might be quite different. I think it's whatever they resonate with.
Yeah. Or cities of light is another thing that comes up too.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's a fascinating subject. Who knows? Because I don't.
Maybe one day we will find out.
Cheryl, was it you that posted something on Facebook earlier this week about, I think it was 50, some doctors at a university somewhere took 50 people
Yeah.
and they actually died, and they brought them back 20 minutes later with some new drug that they've got. Did you post that?
I don't think I did. I don't think I did that one.
I'll see if I can find it and send it to you.
Yeah.
They reckon it was scientific proof of the
Was that the one?
survival.
The article entitled "German Scientists Prove There Is an Afterlife"? Was that what the title was? Something like that.
Title, yes.
Don't remember the title.
If that was a title, then yes, it was.
Yes.
It was on the Afterlife
okay.
page. But if not, I don't know.
Yes, I'm sure.
Are they?
Yes.
Look, thank you. We've just got over time, so I'll let you go. Thank you so much for coming. It's been an absolute privilege and joy to spend this year with you.